Welcome to Conspiracy Files. I'm your host, Zoe Parker, and in today's episode, we're diving into one of the oldest and most debated mysteries in human history, the Great Flood. For centuries, stories of a cataclysmic flood have appeared in religious texts, ancient legends, and even historical records. From Noah's Ark to Mesopotamian myths, civilizations across the world seem to echo the same warning. A great deluge wiped out humanity, sparing only a select few. But was it real? Some believe it was a literal event, evidence of a forgotten global catastrophe. Others argue it's allegory, a symbolic tale passed down through generations. And then there are those who claim the truth is far stranger than we've ever imagined. Stay tuned. Across cultures, across centuries, the story of a great flood has endured. From the ancient Mesopotamians to indigenous tribes of the Americas, civilizations separated by thousands of miles have passed down eerily similar accounts, a cataclysmic deluge that wiped the world clean, leaving only a handful of survivors to rebuild. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest known texts, a man named Utnapishtim is warned by a god to construct a massive boat before a divine flood destroys the world. He gathers animals, his family, and a handful of craftsmen before the storm consumes everything in its path. When the waters recede, his ark rests on a mountaintop, and he releases a bird to find dry land, an image that sounds strikingly familiar. The biblical story of Noah's Ark shares these same beats: an angry deity, a chosen survivor, and a flood that reshapes the earth. But the parallels don't stop there. In Hindu mythology, the god Vishnu warns Menu of an impending flood, instructing him to build a boat and save humanity. The Aztec story of Tata and Nene speaks of a divine warning, a wooden vessel, and a storm that swallowed the earth. Were these cultures all describing the same event? Or is this a case of civilizations telling similar stories because human memory is wired to fear water, destruction, and renewal? Some researchers suggest that many of these accounts originate from real historical flooding events. The Black Sea Deluge hypothesis proposes that a massive flood roughly 7,000 years ago permanently altered human migration patterns. Geological evidence suggests that rising sea levels after the last ice age may have wiped out entire coastal civilizations. Others believe the flood myth stems from collective trauma, ancient cultures attempting to explain the unexplainable. Were they recounting a real planet-wide event? Or were they embedding their fears into folklore, warning future generations of nature's power? There's another perspective, one that suggests these myths aren't myths at all. What if the flood was engineered? Some believe an advanced civilization, perhaps one lost to history, was wiped out deliberately. A reset, a purge of a technologically advanced society that had reached too far, angering powerful entities. The whispers of Atlantis, Lemuria, and pre-flood empires weave into this theory, suggesting that those who came before us were wiped away in a deliberate act of control. And then there's the question of who, or what, survived. Some flood myths speak of beings who existed before humanity, ancient gods, celestial watchers, or something else, watching from the periphery as the world was swallowed by water, ensuring that those who remained told their story in a way that suited them. So was the Great Flood a real historical event, a natural disaster woven into legend, or a carefully orchestrated event meant to wipe away something, or someone, we were never meant to remember? Some believe the Great Flood wasn't just a myth, it was a real historical event that left a lasting imprint on human civilization. Proponents of this theory argue that the evidence is all around us, hidden in the geological record, ancient texts, and even modern scientific discoveries. One of the most compelling arguments comes from geological anomalies. In regions across the world, scientists have found signs of massive flooding events, layers of sedimentary deposits, underwater ruins, and even fossilized marine life far inland. Some claim that these findings could be the remnants of a global flood that reshaped the Earth's landscape, just as the ancient stories describe. The Black Sea Deluge hypothesis is often cited as proof. Around 7,000 years ago, researchers believe that a sudden breach in the Bosporus Strait caused the Mediterranean to flood into the Black Sea basin, drowning vast amounts of land and displacing entire populations. Could this be the real Noah's flood, exaggerated and retold across generations? Others point to evidence of sunken civilizations, such as the ruins found off the coast of India, Japan, and the Caribbean. These structures, some estimated to be over 10,000 years old, suggest that ancient settlements may have been swallowed by rising waters, adding weight to the idea that great floods really did happen, wiping out entire societies. Then there's the argument that the flood wasn't just a natural disaster, but a divine act of judgment. Many religious traditions, from Christianity to Hinduism to ancient Mesopotamian beliefs, tell similar tales of gods punishing humanity's corruption, wiping the earth clean, and starting anew. The consistency of these narratives across cultures raises a question. Were they all inspired by the same catastrophic event? There's also the mathematical and logistical puzzle of Noah's Ark. According to the biblical account, Noah was instructed to build a massive wooden vessel to house 2 of every animal species. Critics argue that the sheer scale of such an undertaking is impossible, but believers claim the ark's dimensions, as described in the book of Genesis, are strikingly similar to modern cargo ships. Could an advanced civilization have constructed something similar? Some go even further, suggesting that the ark wasn't a boat at all. What if Noah's vessel was something else entirely? A hidden bunker? A DNA preservation chamber? Even, some claim, a technologically advanced structure built by an ancient forgotten civilization. If the flood was real, if it did wipe out entire populations, then who or what survived? Some flood myths describe beings who predated mankind, entities who either guided survivors or perished in the catastrophe. Could they have been ancient rulers? Fallen gods? Something far beyond our understanding? The idea that the flood was more than just a local event, that it was a deliberate reset of human civilization, is one of the most controversial theories. If true, it suggests that history as we know it may not just be incomplete, but deliberately erased. One of the biggest mysteries surrounding the Great Flood theory is the lack of concrete global evidence, or at least the kind that aligns perfectly with the ancient stories. If a flood powerful enough to reshape civilization truly happened, why don't we see more clear geological records of a single, simultaneous catastrophe? While evidence of localized floods exists, scientists argue that the kind of world-destroying deluge described in myths would leave undeniable marks across continents. Then, there's the question of survivors. Many flood myths describe a select group of people who were warned and allowed to escape, whether by divine intervention, fate, or knowledge passed down from previous civilizations. But how did they survive? And where did they go? If there was a pre-flood civilization, one wiped from history, what traces did they leave behind? Some theorists suggest that certain ancient structures and artifacts may predate the flood entirely. Sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey and the pyramids of Egypt raise questions about their true age. Did these civilizations inherit knowledge from a lost world, one that existed before the flood and was nearly erased? If so, who built them? There are also lingering inconsistencies in the flood myths themselves. The biblical account of Noah's Ark describes a 40-day storm, while the Epic of Gilgamesh flood lasted only 6 days. Hindu texts speak of a vast but brief deluge, while other cultures claim the flood lasted for years. These differences suggest that multiple events may have been woven together over time, creating the illusion of a single, unified catastrophe. Another unresolved mystery is the Ark itself. If such a massive structure truly existed, where did it go? Over the years, various expeditions have claimed to find traces of a large wooden vessel, most notably on Mount Ararat in Turkey, but no definitive proof has ever been recovered. Was it simply lost to time, buried under ice, or destroyed by the elements? Or was the Ark something else entirely, something not meant to be found? The biggest question, however, is why these myths endure. If the flood never happened, why have civilizations across the globe, many of whom never had contact with each other, passed down eerily similar stories? Is it possible that our collective memory holds onto this fear for a reason? Or, as some suggest, is the truth still hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered? While some believe the Great Flood was a literal event that reshaped civilization, others argue that it is nothing more than myth, a symbolic tale woven into human culture, exaggerated over time to explain natural disasters and existential fears. Skeptics claim that while floods have undoubtedly occurred throughout history, the idea of a global deluge wiping out all of humanity is both scientifically and logistically impossible. One of the most common counterarguments is the lack of geological evidence for a worldwide flood. Scientists argue that while massive floods have shaped landscapes in the past, such as the Ice Age glacial floods, there is no sign of a single planet-spanning catastrophe. If the entire Earth had been submerged, as some religious texts claim, there would be a consistent sedimentary layer covering every continent, yet no such evidence exists. Then there's the issue of water displacement. If a flood covered even the highest mountains, as the biblical account suggests, where did all that water come from? And where did it go? The Earth's water cycle doesn't support such an event unless one considers supernatural intervention, something that mainstream science does not factor into its models. Skeptics also challenge the logistics of Noah's Ark and similar flood survival stories. Could a wooden vessel of the described dimensions realistically withstand the forces of a global storm? How could it have housed 2 of every species, fed them, and kept them alive for over a month? Some argue that these stories were never meant to be taken literally, but rather as symbolic allegories of renewal and rebirth, much like similar tales found in ancient cultures. Another counterpoint is that the flood myths could have stemmed from local disasters, later exaggerated into global events. The Black Sea deluge hypothesis, while compelling, would have only impacted specific populations, not the entire world. Other ancient cultures, like those in China and Africa, do not have universal flood myths, suggesting that the story was never a global phenomenon to begin with. Others believe that the story of the flood is not about water at all. Some historians argue that it may represent the collapse of an ancient civilization, remembered as a flood of destruction. If an advanced society had once thrived and then been lost, whether through war, climate change, or other means, could the flood stories be metaphors for their downfall? Then there are those who suggest the Great Flood was an astronomical event, not a water-based disaster. Could an asteroid impact, a planetary shift, or even a celestial phenomenon have inspired these stories, later reinterpreted through the lens of different cultures? The debate continues, with both sides presenting compelling arguments, but the most intriguing part of this mystery isn't necessarily what happened, but why this story has survived for so long. The idea of a great flood is more than just an ancient tale. It is a story that has shaped societies, influenced world religions, and even altered geopolitical landscapes. Whether taken as a literal event or as a metaphor, its impact on human civilization is undeniable. But why does this story continue to hold such power over people's beliefs? One explanation is psychological conditioning. The flood story plays on one of humanity's most deep-seated fears: the fear of annihilation. Floods, unlike other natural disasters, are relentless. They erase entire landscapes, consume everything in their path, and leave little behind. The idea of an unstoppable force wiping the world clean, only to have a select few survive, taps into a primal anxiety, the fear of losing control, of nature reclaiming dominance. Religious institutions have reinforced this fear for centuries. The flood narrative often serves as a cautionary tale, teaching moral lessons about divine punishment, obedience, and redemption. In Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, and various indigenous beliefs, the flood represents a turning point, a cleansing of the corrupt, and a chance for renewal. This symbolic power makes it easy to see why the story persists. It provides a framework for understanding human suffering and rebirth. The flood myth has also been weaponized in geopolitical and ideological conflicts. Some groups use the story to argue for young Earth creationism, claiming it as proof that the Earth is only a few thousand years old. Others invoke it in climate change debates, drawing eerie parallels between rising sea levels today and the warnings of ancient texts. Some conspiracy theorists suggest that modern floods and natural disasters are engineered events, part of a deliberate attempt to alter society, much like the flood myths of old. And then there is the power of lost history, the idea that something was wiped away and that those in power do not want us to remember it. The belief in hidden knowledge has fueled countless conspiracy theories, from suppressed archaeological discoveries to secret government files that allegedly contain proof of an advanced pre-flood civilization. The idea that a past world order, one possibly more advanced than our own, was destroyed and buried under layers of history is both fascinating and unsettling. Even in popular culture, the flood narrative remains a dominant force. Films, books, and television shows often revisit the theme of global catastrophe, sometimes drawing direct inspiration from the biblical flood, and other times reshaping it into a modern apocalypse scenario. Whether it's a literal flood, a nuclear disaster, or a technological collapse, the message remains the same. The world as we know it can be washed away in an instant. At its core, the Great Flood conspiracy is about more than just water. It's about survival, control, and the fear that history is repeating itself. And for those who believe, the question isn't just whether a great flood happened in the past, but whether another one is coming. There are those who believe the Great Flood wasn't just a natural disaster, or even a divine act of judgment, but something far more deliberate and engineered. These speculative and fringe theories propose that the flood was not an accident, nor was it merely a myth. Instead, it was part of a larger plan, one designed to erase a past that we were never meant to remember. One of the most controversial ideas is that the flood was the result of advanced technology. Some theorists speculate that an ancient civilization, possibly even one more advanced than our own, was wiped out in a global catastrophe brought on by its own scientific and technological ambitions. Could a pre-flood society have experimented with forces beyond their control? Nuclear energy, genetic engineering, or even interdimensional physics? Did they unleash something that had to be stopped before it consumed the entire planet? Then, there's the theory that the flood was not just a reset of human civilization, but a cleansing of non-human entities. Ancient texts and mythologies frequently mention beings who walked the earth before mankind, the Nephilim in the Bible, the Anunnaki in Sumerian lore, or even the Watchers of apocryphal texts. Could these entities have been the true targets of the flood, wiped out in a mass event meant to erase their existence from history? Some take this further, suggesting that the flood was not caused by natural forces but by extraterrestrial intervention. There are theories that an advanced off-world intelligence may have seen Earth as a failed experiment, one that needed to be restarted. Some claim that the gods who warned Noah, Utnapishtim, and Manu were not divine beings at all, but ancient extraterrestrials passing down survival knowledge to a select few. If that were true, the real question is, why? Was humanity being saved or simply reset for a new phase of control? Others look to planetary catastrophe as the source of the flood. Some suggest that a massive comet impact or asteroid collision caused the ice caps to rapidly melt, flooding the world in an instant. There's also the Nibiru theory, which claims that a rogue planet, one hidden on the outskirts of our solar system, passed close to Earth in ancient times, triggering mass tidal waves and cataclysmic climate shifts. Even more extreme are theories that claim the flood was not water at all. Some propose that the term flood was used symbolically to describe a wave of destruction that took many forms: war, fire, disease, or even a shift in human consciousness. Did an ancient ruling class lose control? Was there a war between pre-flood civilizations that ended in total annihilation? And then, there's the idea that the flood never ended. Some conspiracy theorists believe that the real history of Earth has been rewritten over and over again, that each cycle of civilization is eventually erased, replaced, and controlled by hidden forces. If this were true, then perhaps the Great Flood isn't just a story from the past. Maybe it's a warning about the future. There are those who believe that the Great Flood is not just an ancient myth or historical anomaly, but rather a thread woven into a much larger web of global conspiracies, one that connects lost civilizations, secret government knowledge, and hidden agendas meant to control humanity's understanding of its past. If the flood was real, and if it was a deliberate event rather than a natural disaster, then what else has been hidden from us? Some researchers point to the destruction of lost civilizations, societies that predated recorded history but were systematically wiped from existence. Theories about Atlantis, Lemuria, and other ancient world powers often tie back to the flood, with some suggesting that these societies were either erased by a higher force or that they possessed dangerous knowledge that had to be buried, both literally and metaphorically. Was the flood a global reset? If so, was it meant to erase knowledge, technology, or power that we were never meant to rediscover? Then there's the Vatican and its vast archives, rumored to contain suppressed historical texts and records that could challenge mainstream narratives. Some claim that the Vatican and other powerful institutions possess ancient documents that tell a very different story about human origins, pre-flood civilizations, and the real cause of the Great Flood. If such records exist, why are they kept hidden? What would they reveal about the nature of humanity's true past? Others look toward modern government secrecy, suggesting that world powers have been engaged in a long-standing effort to keep certain truths about ancient history under wraps. From classified military installations to underground research facilities, some believe that hidden archaeological discoveries, evidence of pre-flood civilizations, unexplained artifacts, or even remnants of lost technology have been confiscated and suppressed. Could governments and elite institutions know more about the flood and its implications than they let on? Some theorists go even further, tying the flood into the New World Order conspiracy, claiming that history has been rewritten multiple times to keep the population in a constant state of ignorance. If true, it raises a disturbing possibility that we are living in the aftermath of a civilization-wide reset, one that has happened before and may happen again. Could the true nature of the flood, if revealed, challenge the very foundation of modern society and the way we see ourselves? And then there is the extraterrestrial connection. Some believe that ancient gods, the architects of the flood myths, were not divine at all, but rather beings from beyond Earth. Could the Great Flood have been an attempt to wipe out an earlier hybrid civilization, one that was the result of human and non-human interaction? Some theories suggest that the biblical Nephilim, the Anunnaki of Sumerian legend, and other pre-flood entities were not just mythic figures, but beings that were deemed too dangerous to exist, either by their creators or by another force entirely. If the Great Flood was more than just a catastrophe, if it was a calculated global event with hidden motives, then what else have we been conditioned to forget? And perhaps the most pressing question of all, if history truly does repeat itself, is another flood already on its way? There are still many unanswered questions about the Great Flood, and perhaps that is why the theory refuses to fade. If it was just a myth, why does it persist across so many different cultures, separated by vast oceans and thousands of years? Why do flood narratives appear in texts as ancient as the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Bible, Hindu scriptures, and Native American oral traditions? Either it was a real event that left an indelible mark on human consciousness, or the fear of a flood, of total destruction and rebirth, is something deeply embedded in us. Then there is the question of what was lost. If an advanced civilization existed before the flood, where is the evidence? Some researchers argue that underwater ruins and ancient megalithic structures could be remnants of pre-flood societies, but mainstream archaeologists remain skeptical. Could there be lost cities buried beneath the ocean, remnants of a forgotten age wiped away by rising waters? If so, why hasn't definitive proof been found? Another mystery is the role of the survivors. Nearly every flood story describes a select few who were spared, whether by divine intervention, secret knowledge, or sheer luck. But who were they? Were they simply early humans who happened to be in the right place at the right time, or were they chosen for a reason? Some speculate that the survivors were not just ordinary people, but members of a pre-flood elite, keepers of ancient wisdom that has since been lost or hidden. If so, could fragments of their knowledge still exist today, passed down through secret societies, religious institutions, or hidden texts? The lingering question of whether the flood was a natural disaster or something more intentional also keeps this theory alive. If it was a deliberate event, a reset imposed by some greater force, then then it raises unsettling implications about our own time. If humanity was purged once, could it happen again? Some believers in the Great Flood conspiracy suggest that we are on the brink of another such event, whether through climate change, war, or something far more mysterious. Are the warning signs already appearing, just as they supposedly did before the last catastrophe? And then there's the most controversial question of all: who truly controls history? If there are forces actively working to suppress evidence of a lost pre-flood civilization, who benefits from keeping the truth hidden? Some theorists argue that rewriting history is a powerful tool of control. If people don't know where they come from, they can be manipulated into accepting a false narrative. Could it be that the true history of the flood and what came before it is locked away in restricted archives, classified government research, or forgotten ruins that have yet to be excavated? In the end, the story of the Great Flood continues to captivate because it is more than just a legend. It is a mystery that speaks to something primal within us. Whether it was a real event, a metaphor, or something else entirely, one thing is certain: it is not a story we are willing to let go of. The Great Flood remains one of the most enduring mysteries of human history, a tale that has survived millennia and shaped the foundations of countless civilizations. Whether it was a real global catastrophe, a localized event that grew into myth, or something far stranger, the questions surrounding it refuse to be silenced. The consistency of flood myths across cultures suggests something profound, either a shared memory of an ancient disaster or a universal fear embedded in our collective subconscious. Theories range from scientific explanations, massive ice age floods, asteroid impacts, or the collapse of glacial dams, to the more speculative, advanced pre-flood civilizations, hidden knowledge lost to time, or even extraterrestrial intervention. Some believe the flood was a natural event, a simple matter of climate shifts and rising seas. Others argue it was an engineered reset, a cleansing designed to erase something, or someone from history. If the latter is true, who was responsible? And more importantly, what was lost? The idea that knowledge of the flood and what came before it has been deliberately suppressed is one of the most unsettling aspects of this theory. If powerful institutions, governments, or secret societies hold information that contradicts the official narrative, what motive would they have for keeping it hidden? Could the flood have wiped away an era of human advancement far beyond what we imagine? If history has been rewritten to fit a controlled version of events, then what else have we been led to forget? Perhaps the most haunting question is not about the past, but about the future. If the Great Flood was a reset, could another one be on the horizon? Environmental changes, geopolitical tensions, and technological advancements have created a world that feels increasingly unstable. Are we knowingly or unknowingly following the same path as those who came before us? Are the warnings of ancient texts and oral traditions more than just myth? Are they a message? A warning not to repeat the mistakes of the past? The flood, real or not, remains a powerful symbol of destruction and rebirth. It reminds us of the fragility of civilization and the ever-present forces, whether natural or otherwise, that could bring everything crashing down. It also challenges us to question our understanding of history, to ask whether we are truly in control of our destiny, or if we are merely living in the aftermath of a cycle that has repeated itself time and time again. In the end, we may never fully uncover the truth. But one thing is certain: the story of the Great Flood will continue to be told. Whether as history, mythology, or a warning of what is to come, it is a mystery that refuses to be washed away. Thanks for tuning in to the Conspiracy Files podcast. We're here with brand new episodes every Wednesday. If you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, don't forget to follow us and be sure to rate, review, and share your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. You can also reach out anytime by emailing us at contact@theconspiracyfilespodcast.com. Until next time, and remember, the truth is out there. If you enjoyed this episode and want to dive deeper into the world of conspiracy theories, consider subscribing for exclusive access to the material they don't want you to hear. As a subscriber, you'll get banned episodes, episodes deemed too controversial for mainstream platforms, members-only bonus episodes, not available anywhere else. Extended, director's cut versions of your favorite episodes. Early access to new content before it's released to the public. And much more. Thank you for your support. The link is in the description below. Join now.